This is Guy Singer II, famous animator and creator of the hit cartoon series A Land of Toons, starring the famous characters Olive Oder and who? Arc Scales? Oh, are you sure that's his name? Arc Scales. Who cares? Anyway, um, I want to show you behind the scenes footage of my part in the Tiny Toons Reanimated collab, uh, created and hosted by Kit Sully. Her Twitter name is at Kit Sully uh, on Twitter, and the hashtag for the project is hashtag Tiny Toons Reanimated. Um, so this is also going to be a kind of look into how I create my animations for all my cartoons. And, well, let's just get into it. I guess ignore this is top secret. Yeah, just ignore that. It's top secret. Yeah. This is what we'll be looking at. So if you haven't seen the video already, this is my part. And as with every animation, it starts off with the idea in the head, with the brain. Then once that's thought up, we go over into the storyboard. Now I use Animate to animate and also do my storyboards. I used to use Photoshop for storyboarding, but it got to the point where I was tired of juggling around different programs. Like I have to use Photoshop to storyboard, I have to use Animate to animate, then I have to use Adobe Audition to record dialogue, then I have to use Adobe After Effects to composite the cartoon. Then I have to use Adobe Media Encoder to export. So I just streamlined it, and I like this a lot better because, I don't know, it just feels good and animate, gets the job done. Uh, Not saying that Photoshop isn't good, but this is just what I prefer. You can do whatever. But with me, we start off with crudely drawn sketches. Why don't I show the actual project we're talking about? And so here we go, we got rough, all right? And this is crudely drawn, as I said before, mainly just to get the idea of what's pictured in the head, the brain, onto a physical format, and to get across the idea of timing, layout, and what's going on in the scene. And usually, well, not usually, all the time, there would be also a uh, rough sentence of what's going on in the scene and what's going on for dialogue. I don't have it here because the video I'm referencing for the video I'm referencing is actually a clip from a pre-established made cartoon. So the audio and sound effects are all there. So for this step, I didn't take the time to write it down in a quick format because I already know what's going on. But here we go. We have the scene, and it's numbered correctly. So what this means here, this little 1A, 1B, 1C, that's if the scene is the same, right? So this scene 1, same scene 1A, scene 1B, just a good way to keep track of, hey, this is the same scene, but there's something different happening in it from this panel, from the previous panel. So once that's all done, we go over to characters, and this is specifically for title, date, action description, dialogue, and character finalization. Not finalization, but a more in-depth look at what the characters are kind of going to look like. in the final product. And if you notice, they're color coded, which not a lot of storyboards do. But the reason why I do it is so it's more easy to distinguish characters from each other if they're overlaying, like this shot right here, as opposed to them just being typical white and whatnot. It also is for the fact of uh, understanding what character is saying what in the dialogue description. So if you noticed here, Buster here is saying, we crack up all the sensors, right? So, his color is light blue. This color is a slightly darker light blue. And if these sensors were to talk back here or scream or whatever, they would have a dialogue description that would be color, a darker color of what their color is in the storyboard. And, for this shot right here, if their color was just white, you would be able to tell that Buster is the only one saying something here as opposed to the sensors. But in other cases, you might have two characters talking on the same panel, and to save up space, you don't want to have, one panel where this character is talking, or one panel where this character is talking, and then another panel where this character is talking while this character is talking, if you get what I'm saying. So the color coding really helps with that type of situation, so you can fit more into one panel and save up space and whatnot. And last but not least, well, not last but not least, but then we move on to the background, and in this situation it was just one background, so it wasn't too difficult. But yeah, usually there'd be different type of backgrounds and whatnot for different scenes and whatnot. Uh, and then once that's done, we get in. I didn't actually use this in the final product because it was so short that I just felt like it would be too unappealing to the eyes. But we also have one more layer for the camera shots. So for instance, this says zoom out. So if we were going to use this, it would start off right here in this shot, and then it would zoom out to the full extent of the board right here. And then let's say this is this background and scene is a continuation of this background and scene, meaning that this background continues on to this panel with something else going on in the same shot. There would be a little description in between the panels, camera, CP, camera pan, R, CP, camera pan right, because it's panning to the right, my right, and vice versa. And then typically what would happen, for my sake, what would happen after that? So for instance, so we would have the dialogue, right? And the difference between the rough dialogue and the finalized storyboard dialogue is obviously there's a lot more going on to it than the rough, right? So for the rough, I don't have the rough for this, but the rough for this would have just been like one sentence or two. But this is actually a full-on conversation. But the reason why I'm bringing that up is because I also do dialogue scripts for my voice actors. And in some cases, there's a little bit more fleshy outness, not too much, to where it differentiates from the storyboard dialogue. But but it would there'd just be a little bit more going on, maybe like one more sentence or whatnot. And yeah, just a little side note. I'm going to keep it on this just so when I come back to this, I don't have to. Anyway, so once that's done, I export the storyboard uh, into two picture formats, both uh, board and background. So if you can see here, the full board with the background and characters, and then just the background. In this case, it's just this one little panel, but if there were multiple backgrounds to the cartoon, and it wasn't just one continuous one, I would export it just like the storyboard with the characters and backgrounds, except the background one would obviously just have the backgrounds and no dialogue or anything, just the backgrounds. And then once we export them into the file, or import them into the file, do it into different layers. So we have the character layer, okay, and then there'd be the background layer. Then from there we start with animation, and we'll do Bastard here. Damn it, Buster, sorry. Okay, so we'll do Bastard here. Buster here. And what I do to start off the character animation is I'll go over the character and the storyboard, make a layer, and then I'll do a squiggly line like that, select it, hit F8, and then uh, name the character, like Buster Scene 1, if there's multiple scenes. And then, just as an example, the reason for that is because it can get pretty heavy with all the different scenes and whatnot. So it's nice to just have a clean library with, character scenes separated and character mouth scenes separated and anything else extra. But with this little thing, there wasn't really too much, so I didn't even put him into a folder because, it's just something really short and quick. But then we go on to animation. Cut that. So we go on to animation, and we start off with using reference. What I mean by that is I don't really have it here. See this layer down here, time ref? It was so short that I got rid of that so I could see what was going on behind me. But here's how it would typically look. Not typically, always look, I guess. So we have our storyboard, right? We have the description, we have the dialogue, right? And her voice for this scene, all of her voices are actually, or all of her dialogue is actually recorded. But to keep it simple to where I can easily just go one frame over to the next, one frame over to the next, and not have to juggle between, something like this. I use the dialogue as a basic guideline of how heavy the scene's going to be and what facial expressions need to be uh, implemented there, or just whatever expressions, not just specifically facial expressions. So for this, if you notice, like, uh, like, oh, oh no you don't, right? So we start off with nothing and then oh no you don't, right? That's like 10 frames in between, right? Because it's super simple. Um, but for something like this, and only use non-lethal weapons unless they are necromancers, that's a little bit more heavy of a sentence. So the density of the pose to pose is going to be a little bit more uh, heavy. So what I'm getting down to is it all just depends on the length of the sentence, and then when we time it to the actual voice acting, it will pretty much be on point. But if not, in some cases, you'll just need to extend the frames a little bit more, or take away a little bit, and you'll get something, you know, get something get something like this, right? Because this all started off like how I just showed you, or it was all on ones, and then we timed it out uh, separately without the voice, and then we timed it further with the voice implemented. That's just how I do it. I mean, they do kind of do that in the industry, but it's a little bit different. Oh, that's a nice face. So then, once we get this all posed out, we add in a white background so that way when I'm animating, if I need to reference the specific pose, like see that pose in the back, she's grabbing onto his nose. See, I trace that, add a little bit more detail, and then I don't really have any other pose for that scene to reference, so I just use the white box to break it up, and then I add in just the poses for each specific, well, pose based on the dialogue. And then once that's done, we animate the in-betweens. Now I'll go back over to the Tiny Toons reanimation thing. So now that Buster's poses are finalized, we do the in-betweens, and that is all done by hand, and as you notice, separated into different layers. So for instance, we got like the arm layer, arm front layer. If he had if his back arm was doing something, he would also have an arm back layer. But you got the eye front, mouth, ear, eye back, pardon me, head, body, so on and so forth. The reason why we do this, or I do this, is to streamline it, to make it a little bit more easier. So if a character is, like um, his body's not really like moving here, and neither is his head. So instead of having to draw everything on ones like they did back in the old days of Looney Tunes, uh, Tom and Jerry, Mickey Mouse, heck, even Tiny Toons and Animaniacs, instead of having to draw everything on ones and having to draw stuff that's not moving over and over again, you can just quickly, leave that how it is, right, with no keyframes, and then just animate specifically the stuff um, that's moving. And, doing it as one person, it definitely makes time go a lot faster, and you can get stuff out a little bit more quickly. And that's not to say that modern day cartoons like Steven Universe or Regular Show or Adventure Time or SpongeBob don't utilize that. They do. Um, and it's all done frame by frame, hand, traditionally. Um, and then from that, we move on to the mouth. The reason why I'm separating the mouth from everything else is because it is its own specific thing. So the mouth, as you notice, is a symbol, kind of like bastard is. Oh, darn it, Buster is. So the reason for that is because instead of doing it like how they did it in the old days, where they literally would have to have a timesheet specifically for every movement of the mouth, uh, you can just do the basic A, E, I, O, U's and other valves, and then when you lip sync it, you can time it specifically, or not specifically, what you think fits that certain word you're listening to. Like if he's like doing a W, like a woo, woo, you could use this or that. You could even get away with this or that, or if he's doing a like F sound, like f, 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 you could use this, or you could use this. This could be used for L, or it could be used for R's. You get the gist. And the reason why this is not lining up specifically is because in some scenes I have characters turning their heads. So like this mouth, as you saw, would only be used in this pose. I mean, we could use this, but you could see where it like droops over, whatnot. I would have to add on more, and to not to make it simple, quick. Use this for this specific head pose, and then to not copy and paste this one, I did another one to keep it interesting, and this would only be used in this scene. We could use this, and it would work, but it was such a short moment that it didn't really matter. And then animation for the mouth. I know you see keyframes, but what I did was I used the technology available, and what happened was this is hold on. This is what it would originally look like. This whole layer would just be this with it would look something like this actually down here, where you would just have keyframes for the poses of the mouth. Well, then I would just do this, go create classic tween, and then look, there you go, the computer does it for you. Then for lip syncing purposes, and for any purpose really, I would do keyframe each keyframe, and there you go. So by this point, everything is animated, and everything's animated except for the lip sync. Then we go into coloring, and coloring is just simply using the paint bucket tool and, coloring in whatnot. Sometimes I do have to paint in where stuff isn't like fully closed off, like the arm here, but that's just a simple line, and then, using the paint bucket tool for the rest. Now, I have a video reference in this file that I used for audio only and color. But typically, if I don't have a character that I already have color referenced and it's like a new character or a new background, I will do this. I will click here, and then I'll click somewhere here based on the baseline of what type of color I want. So, if I was doing grass, I would do that. And then I would click on this color wheel here, and I would use these two right here that would basically combine them together to fully get a unique color that is fully fleshed out and more suited to what I want. So maybe it's like a dry, grassy area. Maybe use something like that. Like desert. I don't know. You know. And then once coloring and whatnot is all done, we time it out without the audio, and that's simply just, uh, like I said before, using the dialogue to base how long sentences are going to be. So I'll reference this again. So if it's like, oh no, you don't, right? Well, this, I don't want that to be too long because the voice actress's lines that are already recorded, or you know, she doesn't say it for like a minute straight. So we'll just do it on twos with a little bit of threes. And that'd be good. And then we do that for the rest of the entire thing, and it would probably come out to be, like 8 or 9 seconds. Then from there, we would add in the voice, and these little hammers next to this mean that they're guidelines or guide layers. So when you export the video, they're not going to come out in the final product, which is really nice. So we copy this layer. I would paste it in. And usually, uh, audio files have this little blue line, so it's easy to understand, like, what's being said and where the heavy loudness of the dialogue is and where dialogue starts and whatnot. But the reason why I didn't do that, um, here is because the audio file I used was literally the video reference, or the video Kitsuli gave me to reference for the part of the collab. But it's got audio in it. You can't hear it, but there is audio there. So then from there, I do the lip syncing, and well, actually, before I do that, I time it out a little bit more. If it's not fully, uh, consistent to the length of the audio, and then from there, once everything's timed out, we do the lip syncing. And that's, like I said before, just listening for the valves, whatever words match with what you're hearing, or whatever sounds match, whatever mouth positions match with whatever you're hearing. And that's simply just done, you know, set it as a single frame, because if you use play once, it will play through what's in the symbol, what you've drawn in the symbol once. If you loop, it's self-explanatory, it will loop it constantly. Single frame, whatever frame you have it set, it will only show that frame. And that's usually what I use, or no, that is what I use. And like, let's say he's doing Tiny Toons, we're trying to capture that T. So I would just go, okay, I'll use this or this. I think I'm just gonna go with that, you know. And then once lip syncing's done, we're not done with animation yet. Now, I have this term called a regular show animation, or Family Guy animation, where it's literally just this. See how his mouth is just moving for that scene? When his head turns, there's not really any type of secondary motion going on. I mean, this is good right here, and this is good, but we need a little bit more in between because it's looking a little bit too much like Family Guy or regular show. Well, that's where the modern day technology comes in. So, what we do here is we do the poses again. Oops, sorry. We do the poses again, and we use, I forget what this tool is called, free transform tool. And we center the gravity of the thing, which is this white dot right here. So notice if I move the white dot right here and I move him, it's going to move based on where that white dot is. If I center it down here, see? So we give it more secondary animation using that. And then once that's done, it's like with the mouth. We create classic tween, and then bam. He's popping up a little bit more. He's leaning back in that scene. There is a little bit of a bump there because I think I didn't fully Yeah, there we go. See, so like how he leans back and then he goes forward, like in the original, or just in the symbol. Oh, saving again. In the symbol, um, see how he's just like still, very flat, but here, leaning forward, moving back. See, so it's just a nice way to flesh out the animation using the tools provided. Um, you know, you can do it all on once if you want, but that's just preferably how I do it. And then before we move on to the background, we're going to talk about the sensors real quick. So the sensors are a little bit different, and this applies to some other characters too. But see how there's a lot of them? I didn't want to specifically separate every single body part into separate layers, mainly because the only thing moving really is their faces. And even to just have like, a body layer and then an eyes and mouth layer for like all these characters, the layers would have been really heavy and whatnot. So to streamline it and to make it more easy to reference when timing out the Thanos snap disappearance, I just did it all on ones, and yeah. But overall, basically the same process that I showed you with Buster. Symbol tweening wise though, the only symbol tweening animation was the fading away. And what I did there is I'll show you on Buster. So you go here, you got Alpha, and you can already see him disappearing, but we'll do 100 there. Go Alpha again, set it to 0, and then we'll do the symbol tween. There, see? And I just don't use, I don't just use that for having characters disappear. I also use it for like glow effects, like this, and shadows. And then, now that animation is done, we move on to the background. And we start off with outlines. See, nothing too fancy. Then we copy and paste that onto another layer and we color it in. And the reason for that is because if you see here, the shades, the shadows, are bleeding over into the outlines. Well, when we turn on the background outline layer, boom. This is a really easy way to get shading done without you having to redraw outlines and whatnot. See, so if I want to add some rim lighting on this part, bam, bam. And then once that's all done, we have our scene. Then we export it. We go File, Export, Export Video, redirect it to the proper folder, and then it's going to convert to Adobe Media Encoder because Animate exports video files as MOVs, and those are very, 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 very heavy files. And the reason why I don't export the sound out is because Animate also exports sound out very, very, very low quality, like it's from 1984. But I do keep it Animate open to reference audio placement for like voices and whatnot. So once that's done, um, I just cut this. So once that's done, there'll be a file here, and it basically will just be an MP4 version. And you hit start, and it will uh, render it out as the MP4 file, and it will have less heaviness to it. Then from there, we import it into Adobe After Effects, and it's not on this specific file because there wasn't really a lot of sound effects or any sound effects or music at all to add. But typically what I would do is I'll just show you. So we'll have what I'll do is I will do a After Effects file that consists of just the sound effects. That will just consist of the sound effects and audio. Then I will export that from Adobe After Effects to Adobe Media Encoder, export that as an MP4 so it's not heavy, and then I will make another file that will use the video that has the voices and sound effects, and then that file will have music added to it, and then I will export that file export to Adobe Media Encoder, and then render that from Adobe Media Encoder out as an MP4, and then we'll have the final version with voices, sound effects, and music. And then I just upload it to my website, YouTube, Twitter, and all that jazz, and that's pretty much how I make my cartoons. I hope you enjoyed this. I want to thank Kitsuli once again for allowing me to be a part of this project. This is my first Reanimated collab ever, and I really had a lot of fun with it. And I hope to work with her further in the future. If you're curious about who she is, go hit her up on Twitter at Kitsuli, and hit up hashtag TinyToonsReanimated on Twitter, because that's the page that she made to juggle this project. But as for that, I'm going to bounce. That is a video of how I did this scene and how I do my other animations. Alright, bye-bye.